Very much. Welcome to everybody tonight. I'm Professor Alex Nunn. If I put my teeth in, it'll help. I'm Dean of Research here at Leeds Trinity. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all to our university tonight. Both of those of you in the room and those of you further afield joining on our web stream. In particular, I know there's lots of very special people to Danielle tonight, so welcome to you. Thank you very much for being here. We're very proud this evening to host the latest in our series of inaugural lectures, but before I get onto that detail, I've got a few important notices. We're not expecting any fire alarms, so if you hear a big noise, then please follow the green signs to the exits. Somebody on the outside will help you find out where to go. The closest toilets are down the corridors. Again, somebody will be there at the door to help you find the way if you need that. Inaugural lectures are really important events in the life of our university. They serve to welcome newer members to our professorial community, both those who join Leeds Trinity from outside and also those like Professor McDermott who are promoted to the role for their exceptional work in our academic community. We're really proud that our professoriate contains both traditional research professors and also professors of practice and teaching and learning. That diversity in our professoriate reflects our career-led ethos. So a few words about our speaker tonight. Our inaugural speaker tonight is Professor Danielle McDermott. She's a Professor of Custodial Practice. She's responsible for leading and delivering our Masters in Applied Custodial Leadership in partnership with Unlocked graduates. There's that old Dostoevsky quote that I knew many of you will know that I would quote tonight about judging the state of a society by the state of its prisons. Now, strategic programs like Unlocked have a vital part to play in ensuring that our prisons are run as well as they can be, and we're really proud of the work that Danielle, her wider team, and also our partners play in those endeavours. Danielle's work in shaping and improving custodial practice is a core part of our mission to undertake impactful research and knowledge exchange, which makes a positive contribution to society. It's central to how we live out our values and ethos. A little bit of background. Before coming to academia, Danielle spent 10 years working in prisons. Initially as a trainee forensic psychologist, starting as a treatment manager for the Safer Custody Unit at HMP Leeds, a specialist unit for vulnerable prisoners at risk of self-harm and suicide. Later, she worked with young people at a youth offender institute in Wetherby, and in particular worked with young people who committed serious violent and sexual offences, conducting risk assessments and designing and delivering tailored interventions. I've got a few accolades to mention also about Danielle. In a sign of things to come, in her very first year working for the Prison and Probation Service, she was awarded Prison Service Staff of the Year, both regionally and nationally. She also received a certificate of commendation from the Butler Trust for outstanding contribution within the prison service. Further acknowledgement of her expertise and standing in the community ensued. She was selected as a National Academic Member for the Youth Justice Advisory Board, and as part of that role, she provides advice to the Board and Ministry of Justice on evidence for developing policy and practice, exploring potential areas for collaboration, helping to shape the direction of future thinking for the organisation and the youth justice sector as a whole. She's also an ambassador for Tempus Novo, alongside other luminaries such as Professor Nick Hardwick, former Chief Inspector of Prisons, and also our local hero, Jamie Jones Buchanan. Tempus Novo is an award-winning charity which was born out of the very pressing need to challenge the cycle of crime and helps to secure employment and provides mentoring to people released from prison. Danielle does really important work with that organisation. Now, it used to be that we on occasions like this, we'd get telegrams. I've got the modern equivalent tonight. So a message from our Provost and Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Professor Malcolm Todd. Danielle, I'm sorry I can't be here tonight for your professorial lecture. You are an inspirational academic leader in your field and a worthy recipient of this professorial status. Danielle plays a key role as part of our work to ensure that we connect with external agencies in partnerships. And this is instrumental in delivering strategic projects for our university. Danielle combines this external engagement with high quality learning and teaching and research. Malcolm says, I hope you have a great time tonight. I'm really looking forward to hearing more from Danielle's reflections on her career and insight into professional practice. And I hope that all of you enjoy the lecture too. I also hope that many of you will be able to stay with us afterwards. We've got refreshments in the atrium, and that would be a really good opportunity for you to both congratulate Danielle and catch up with her. So all that said, and without further ado, I'm sure you're bored of listening to me, it's my absolute pleasure to welcome our colleague, Professor Danielle McDermott, to the stage.
Well, Alex, you've stolen all of my thunder and said everything that I was going to say, so we might as well go and have refreshments now, but I'll give it a go. So I'm so overwhelmed right now. This is crazy to see kind of so many people that I love, my mum, my dad, my nana, my sister, colleagues, old and new, friends. It's just an unbelievable, like really overwhelming situation right now. I thought I'd start by kind of saying, some of you might not know what an inaugural lecture is. And an inaugural lecture is the first of something. So tonight is about me doing my first lecture as a professor, officially, I suppose. I'm going to tell a little story, and hopefully I'm not going to embarrass my nana too much. So my sister told me a story over the weekend that my nana went into the local card shop and instead of just looking for a generic congratulations card, she made a beeline for the shop assistant and asked her, did she have any inaugural cards that she could have for her granddaughter because she was doing her inaugural lecture, because she was so proud. So thank you, Nana. Yeah, it's really strange to be here, kind of trying to be serious when most of you know me for being anything but. And I'm kind of looking at you guys at the back, and you guys at the front definitely know me for not being serious. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to set some expectations. So first of all, you might hear in my voice that I'm very, very nervous, and I might end up speaking even quicker than I usually do, so apologies for that. I'll try not. Please do indulge me for the next 45 minutes while I talk about my career today. We know it's all quite embarrassing to speak about yourself and talk about what you've done, so yeah, please indulge me. And the final thing, which is probably the most important, I'm probably going to be talking about things that might make me a little bit emotional, so I may get emotional during this, so please bear with me and get emotional with me if you want. So the next slide, sorry Dad, look at his face. You know, so how did I get from this kind of bald baby with really, really big ears sitting on my dad's lap with his ginger moustache and black hair to standing outside the House of Lords looking longingly into the distance? As most of you can probably know from my accent, if you don't know me already, I am Leeds born and bred. I had the best childhood. My mum and dad gave us the best childhood. My mum, my dad, my sister, my baby sister. I'm going to tell you a story about my mum now. I'm going to embarrass my mum. My mum, again, we were good children generally, good Catholics, and we, you know, say for example, I wasn't letting my sister get involved in something, or I was doing something a little bit naughty. Mum would say on many occasions, kind of, you just wait till your dad gets home. And and I'd kind of think, well, what do you mean by that? Like, when Dad came home, nothing happened. So she kept saying it and kept saying it and kept saying it. I kept thinking, what does she mean? Like, why? What is going to happen? And she said it one time, and I must have been feeling really, really brave. And I said, from the top of the stairs, I may add, why? Can't you do it yourself? And I think from then you knew that I was going to be a sassy little madam. I also want to tell you a little bit about my dad. So me and my sister call him lovingly Liam Neeson. And you might want to imagine the Taken movie if you've seen it. Because if anybody messes with his daughters, he will look for you and he will find you. I just wanted to start off as well by saying some lessons that my mum taught me. Not probably, she didn't sit me down and tell me these lessons, but definitely things that I picked up from my mum as I went through my life, and my dad as well. The first one is treat others as you want to be treated. And I think that's really, really important. And particularly working in prisons, I found that to be something so, so important to do. And as well, I did reflect on this while I was working in prisons, in that it's not about respect, it's about decency. It's about treating people how you want to be treated. The second one, it's a bit similar, but we're all humans. No one is better than you. No one is above you. No one is below you. We're all human beings. And we all do the same things. So, again, just remember that. And again, I did remember that. I remember being in prison. I was the lowest grade that you could possibly be. I was an assistant psychologist, probably getting paid £14,000 a year at that point. And I was doing some work with one of the governors. And I remember ringing him up and going, Barry, when are you going to get that work done for me? You know, and I was an assistant psychologist. So, again, I listened to that lesson, Mum. And the third one, and probably why I'm such a control freak, is if you want a job doing, do it yourself. So I thought I'd end on that one. I've included this next picture because, in all honesty, my career to date hasn't been linear. And in fact, it's not really been something that I've fully kind of thought of or planned out really well, actually. And as Alex said, I'm proud to be a Professor of Custodial Practice. So this university is really good at recognising people's prior experience in professional practice. So my career initially in the prison service is something that's really, really important to this role. So just as a bit of a background, I'm stood here. I have a PhD in forensic psychology from the Institute for Psychological Sciences at the University of Leeds. I'm a senior fellow of the HEA, the Higher Education Authority, and I'm a chartered psychologist registered with the BPS, the British Psychological Society. I remember going to the University of Leeds. I did my undergraduate degree at the University of Leeds, and I did my Masters at the University of York. So I've never strayed very far from Leeds, really, it being a very good university. And I remember that was the first time that I ever realised that actually I have an accent. And my friends used to say, they could hear me coming down the corridor shouting, "Oh no!" and some of my friends from uni are on the call there. I'm kind of proud to say that I was a student for many years, but I don't think I was a typical student. I've never to this day had a pot noodle. And I only, because I had lots of friends in Leeds and I came from Leeds, I didn't make lots of friends, but I did make 3 amazing friends. So Charlotte, who's online, who is a head teacher from Stratford-upon-Avon. I've got Sian, who also is a head teacher from Oxford, and Grace, who's a psychotherapist from Manchester. So yeah, I might not have made lots of friends, but I certainly made kind of, brilliant friends. I've been at LTU now for 12 years, and I suppose from here I'm probably going to go back into my career. But even though I've been here for 12 years, I've delivered lots of programmes, I've got lots of students in the audience, and that's just amazing. But I kind of don't see myself as an academic, and maybe I should. I kind of identify more as a practitioner, and I'm really proud of the work that I do with people in practice, particularly in prisons. So maybe there's a new term called pracademic, so maybe I identify myself a bit more of a pracademic. And I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but sticking with the prison theme, I don't think I fit the profile of a professor very well. And I've had quite a few cards so far today saying just that. So hopefully I'm able to kind of break the mould a little bit and hopefully see that there's every type of person out there who is, who can be a professor. I'm actually going to take my gown off for now. I think we've got our money's worth now, haven't we, Alex? I'm going to show off this dress that I spent, and Mum and my Nana spent a lot of money on. So, yeah. Yes, sorry. So this part, I was going to actually send you off to do a quiz yourself. So I was going to get you out your phones and do a QR code and bring you to a quiz. But actually, what I thought is, I just want to set the scene, really. I want to set the context of what I mean by working in a prison. What type of person in prison? The majority of people in the public will never set foot in a prison. It's kind of a hidden environment. Prison officers are not seen in the same way that kind of police officers, nurses, maybe other public sector workers are seen. But I just want to kind of give some stats about the prison sector at the moment. So, overcrowded. You might have seen that in the news, definitely. So at the moment, there's just over 83,000 people in prison, and that includes men, women and young people. That's risen 80% in 30 years, so huge, you know, and that has a massive impact on staffing levels, on the amount of service that we can offer, what we can do in prisons, the environment that people are living in. So yeah, just to set the scene. There are now almost a record level more people on remand. So there are a huge number of people in prison who are on remand who haven't been sentenced. So, you know, we know not guilty, you know, not guilty until proven guilty. So, you know, again, think about that. Ethnic minority groups are much more likely to be given a custodial sentence than any other groups, disproportionately. There's a disproportionate number of children who have been in care previously in youth institutions especially. So about 1% of the general population has been in care previously, but you're talking about 46% of young people have been previously in care in secure training centres, and then 62% of young people have been in care in young offenders institutes, like I worked at Wetherby. 61% of people are in prison for non-violent crimes. So again, it might make you question, are we using prisons for the right reason? Are the right people in our prisons? Again, given that they are overcrowded. And that increases when we talk about young people, and it increases when we talk about women. 2 in 5 people, so about 38% of people, are serving a sentence for 6 months or less. And again, that increases when we're talking about women and when we're talking about young people. And again, what we know about short sentences for 6 months and less, and even 12 months and less, they serve very little purpose, and actually they often cause more harm than good. You can imagine a woman going to prison for a fairly petty crime of theft, going to prison for 6 months. They will usually lose their house, lose their job if they had one, lose access to their children, and then you're causing completely new and different problems. 1 in 4 people in prison have learning disabilities or are neurodivergence, and I'm not going to go into the different categories, but again, you can see the type of population in there. And in terms of women, only 45% of the population, 4 out of 5% of the population of women are serving more short sentences, they have more mental health problems, and they serve like kind of more in terms of less not serving violent offences. So again, we need to kind of question what we are doing with the prisons, with the people that they serve. So I just wanted to kind of set that context, and then I'm going to move on to talk about working at Leeds Prison. And this is where I met, I can't see you actually, but Helen. Helen Turner's here, oh, she's there at back. So Helen was my supervisor at HMP Leeds as a psychologist, as a training psychologist. And I must say, Helen is such, and still is, such an inspiration to me. Helen is somebody that supported me and others throughout their journeys into psychology. And I can honestly say, today, I've never kind of worked with somebody who managed me in such a way that Helen did. And that's no disrespect to my current line managers, but genuinely, kind of Helen had such a knack at being able to really kind of praise you and give you lots of kind of positive regard when you're doing something right. But also, if you'd done something wrong or you weren't going in the right direction, you knew that she would also tell you that. And that's, I think, her hard mix to have. As Alex said, I worked for about 10 years across both HMP Leeds and HMYOI Wetherby. I first of all worked at Leeds Prison, and I've included this picture up there because the turret on the right-hand side, and it sounds really fancy, doesn't it, when you say turret, but actually it really wasn't. But that turret on the right-hand side was our psychology office, wasn't it, Helen? In the old gate of the prison. And yes, I worked there for probably about six years. I was paid to do my masters by the prison service. They kind of funded me to do my masters in forensic psychology at the University of York. I was quickly kind of given lots of responsibility. First of all, I did a lot of stuff around why staff sickness was so high at Leeds Prison. At the time, there was a really kind of pro-psychology governor there, Ian Blakeman, who really, whenever there was something going on, whether it was on a wing, whether it was staff, he would call on us as psychologists to kind of try help him solve the problem. And it was really, 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 really brilliant. Quite quickly, I was appointed as the treatment manager for something called the Safer Custody Unit. And it was a unit for people who were at risk or vulnerable to self-harm and suicide. And it was there where I met my prison mum, Sheila, who's here today. And yeah, we had a brilliant time working with people who were really vulnerable, really at risk, but as a group of prison officers, mental health nurses, substance misuse workers, and Sheila and myself as psychologists, we worked together and designed and delivered a 4-week psychosocial intervention for those people who were vulnerable and at risk. We employed a Tai Chi instructor, we employed a yoga instructor, and again, it was quite unique at that time. We're talking probably 10 years ago now. It was quite unique at the time, and we really made a difference at that time. I really believe that. However, as a psychologist or as somebody working in a prison, you often don't see the good stories, you often don't see the successes, because you tend to see either the people coming back into prison, or you just don't see them again, and you probably forget about them in the hundreds of people that you work with. A big part of my role at Leeds and at Wetherby, and I suppose it led me on to my PhD, was I was an ACT assessor, which is something, it stands for Assessment, Caring, Custody and Teamwork. But basically it's a risk management tool for people who are vulnerable and at risk of self-harm and suicide. And I could usually do that in my daily life, and I was quite good at leaving my job and what had happened that day at the door. Often, obviously, as you can imagine, I heard lots of harrowing, difficult, traumatic stories of people's lives day in, day out, but I was quite good at leaving it at the door. There was a time, and Helen was kind of key in all of this, as part of our roles as psychologists, we have to be reflective. And during this time, my sister, who's there, sat on the second row, looking the picture of health, was in, well, I was just going to say was in prison. No, she wasn't. Yeah. Was in hospital. She had kind of over 20 surgeries, was in intensive care for over a month, was on life support for 2 weeks, being breathed for, I suppose. Really, really, really dark time in our family. And at that point, I was working with people who were telling me they didn't want to be here anymore. They wanted to take their own lives, or they had attempted to take their own lives. And as much as I could have done that before that, I really, really struggled. So that was the time where I really had to kind of step back and kind of say, actually, right now, I don't think I'm going to be very good at that job. I need to focus on my family. And I still worked because it was like I loved work and I loved my sanctuary, and the team at Safer Custody were amazing at kind of taking me to and from hospital at lunchtimes and things like that. They were amazing. But I just couldn't do that particular job. I just thought I couldn't sit in front of somebody who was saying they wanted to die when my sister didn't have a choice. I think the message there that I want to say is that I suppose as professionals, particularly working with people who are vulnerable, live complex lives, have complex issues and problems, you need to be able to take a step back and look after yourself in that situation, because otherwise you can't look after the people that you're trying to help, really. There's every type of person in prison. It's not maybe what you might think. And there's not many kind of documentaries or kind of TV shows or films that really depict it very well. I think the one that's the most kind of real life, I think, recently is Time. That was quite good, definitely portraying it. But yeah, there's absolutely every type of person in prison. I'll just tell you a couple of stories. One of the things, again, I'm probably 21 when I first went into work in prison, naive, came from a really loving family, not really experienced any sort of trauma or anything particularly bad, really. And I used to think naively that most people who are in prison don't want to be in prison. So I thought, if you're in prison, you want to get out. And I remember working with this young man who was about the same age as me, probably about 21, 22 at the time. And he was getting released the next week. He was a prolific self-harmer. And I was asking him how he was feeling. And I said, have you got things sorted? Have you got anywhere to live? Have you got, kind of housing set up? Have you got anywhere to work set up? And he just says, oh no, I'm absolutely dreading it. I'm literally thinking of the next thing I can do to come back in, because this is a home to me. This is the place where people care for me. People ask how I am. I don't have that on the outside. And that really shocked me, that we're locking up people that actually, what are we doing in society? Like Alex said, kind of if we judge our society by the state of the prisons, I think we should be pretty ashamed. The other person that again really shocked me and upset me was a guy. He was probably about 70 years old, and he'd worked past his retirement just on the odd day, and he was in for manslaughter because the forklift truck that he had driven had actually malfunctioned and he'd killed somebody. And seeing his face day in, day out, it literally broke my heart, because I just thought, he's like my granddad, like literally, he's like my granddad. You know, it wasn't all those types of cases, but there were lots of sad cases. Another guy that we worked with in safer custody was an older gentleman again called Patrick, and he was homeless on the outside. He was an alcoholic. He was non-verbal in the main, and we recognised that he was really struggling on the wing. He wasn't self-harming, but he was really severely getting bullied. The only thing that he cared about was his tobacco, and he was getting that taken off him on a regular basis. So we went to his door and we said, "Do you want a job?" And he said, "Yeah." Well, he nodded his head, and he said, "Yeah." And we went the next day and we brought him boots, we brought him some clothing to wear, we brought him some soap, a shaver, and literally it transformed him. Literally transformed him. So yeah, just kind of, I suppose, think about that and kind of challenge, you know, what we think about in society in terms of what a prison is. I did love working at Leeds, and there's some great colleagues that I worked with at Leeds here today, so thank you. In particular, I want to mention Claire Villaruby, who at the time was the Deputy Governor and later went on to be the Governor at the HMP Leeds. And I'm going to mention Claire a little bit more later, actually. But yeah, it was a fantastic place to work. It was a tough prison. So for most of you who are from Leeds probably know the prison. It's known as the Castle on the Hill, and it was built to look like that. It's a scary prison. The staff can be very intimidating, but somehow I managed to get on. But again, I think it really did teach me how to, you know, hold my own, really. You really did have to hold your own. I remember one time I was opening up an ACT document, so a risk management plan for somebody who was who I thought was at risk of suicide, actually. And the senior officer on the wing at the time was saying, no, don't open it. You're just causing us more work, and just giving me a lot of grief, basically, for opening up this. He wasn't saying as politely as that. And, you know, giving me a lot of grief for opening up this act. And I absolutely stood my ground and said, no, you know, how dare you speak to me like that? And how dare you question what I'm going to do? And I kind of really told him what for, really. And I remember the PEIs walking past and going, "Are you all right, Danielle?" I went, yeah, you're all right. And walked past. But, you know, I really said to him, you know, the next time you'll be speaking to somebody else and they maybe won't have the confidence like me to do that. And what if they come in the next day and that person has taken their life? What would you do then? You know, that's the kind of things that we're thinking about. I'm going to include a bit, you probably remember some of these people here. So like Alex said, in the first year of working in the prison service, I was really lucky. Again, I was mentored by Helen, and I'd done a little bit of work with something called the MQPL, which was some research that came out of the University of Cambridge, and it stands for Measuring the Quality of Prison Life. And I suppose in terms of university kind of perspective, it's a bit like the NSS, and it kind of it tested how staff and prisoners felt in terms of how they felt in that prison, and it was done nationally. And we did a little bit of work on this MQPL questionnaire, and in particular staff were feeling really, really unhappy. So we dug a little bit deeper, and we set up as a psychology team, we set up some focus groups, and we asked staff from the questionnaire a little bit more about how they were feeling. And from that we worked with different departments like HR and other teams. We worked with the workshop so that they could actually print out, and we made something called the People Plan. And it was for that Helen, thankfully, kind of nominated me for something called the Prison Staff of the Year Award under the category of staff support. And again, I think that staff support is something that hopefully I've carried on throughout my career. I was then really lucky to get from that kind of a Butler Trust commendation for outstanding contribution to the prison service, which I was really proud of. And I was sent a really fancy invitation from Buckingham Palace with a wax seal on the back of it, inviting me to Buckingham Palace to receive my award. And as part of the Prison Staff of the Year award, I was given a number of vouchers, about £1,000, so it was a lot of money to me. And I booked a holiday to go with my friend Claire, who's not here today, to Turkey. and it just about landed on the same day as invited to Buckingham Palace. So I had to make a decision. Where did I go? Turkey. I always put this slide up and my husband laughs because he's heard me lecture if we've been online lecturing. I recently lectured to the Women's Institute in Roundhay, and I put this picture up because when I'm talking about risk assessment, because in Minority Report, Tom Cruise can predict the future. And what I say is, you know, wouldn't it be great if in like Minority Report, we could predict the future? And what I say is that risk assessment is really difficult, and that was a really big part of my role. It was risk assessing whether somebody should be released or not, and whether I was safe to go sit in a room with them alone. How would their day been before that? What had happened before? Were they in a good state of mind? I was risk assessing whether somebody should be, would be at risk of self-harm or suicide. Whether somebody would pose a risk if they were to be released. So in terms of parole reports. And what I did last week, it was meant to be face-to-face, so he wouldn't have even heard it then, and I think I'd have got away with it. But I was sat in the room next to my husband, because it was put online, because at this time it was the day when we got really bad snow. So they decided to turn it into an online session. So I was in the other room and I was really confident. I was saying, wouldn't it be great, like in Mission Impossible, that we could predict the future? And I kept saying it. I was getting really, really confident about it. And he came in the room and I thought, what are you doing? I'm on a lecture. And he came in with a piece of paper and in bold letters it said, it's Minority Report, not Mission Impossible. And I was like, oh. So, yeah, thanks, Stu. You brought me back down to earth. I thought I was doing really well. So you might be wondering why I've put these words up there. So I eat bear munch. I worked in Wetherby Young Offenders, and again I followed Helen. Helen basically moved there to work there, and quickly after she asked if it was something I'd like to do to maybe work at both sites. So I worked basically for half the week in Leeds and half the week in Wetherby. And I kind of got the best of both worlds. And I found it really interesting, the difference between working with adults and the difference between working with young people. I was specifically at Wetherby Young Offenders working on a unit called the Keppel unit. And again, that's a unit for prisoners who are vulnerable or at risk of self-harm or suicide, but also prisoners or young people who are at risk of themselves or because of the sentence that they're serving. I kind of really noticed the difference between working with adults and working with young people, particularly in terms of the adults that I tended to work with, and this is a very big overgeneralisation, but the adults that I tended to work with tended to keep things to themselves. They'd keep a little bit of information when I was asking about the time of the offence, for example. But the young people used to big it up, and it was a badge of honour. And I can see why it was, and it was very fun to work with young people. I remember this one particular young person who was in for a violent offence, and he was telling me about the time of the offence. But actually, this young person, it's not a particular, it's another sad story, because unbeknownst to him, he was actually groomed by a gang to work with them. He was given small bits of money, like £50, which meant a lot to him, but actually was selling drugs that were worth thousands, tens of thousands of pounds. And this young person was talking to me and saying, but miss, I can't believe you don't carry a knife. Like, I can't believe it. How could you walk down the street? What if somebody has beef with you? And he genuinely wasn't being funny or facetious or anything like that. He genuinely couldn't understand how anybody wouldn't carry a knife. And actually, I've reflected on that and thought, isn't it really sad that there are young people in our city that feel scared of their lives for going out, that they actually feel that they have to put a knife in their pocket to feel safe, and isn't that really sad? I think really, again, reflecting on our role in society, really. This quote came from a young person that I worked with, and he was a lot of fun, and I don't know whether Helen will remember him. But I was walking with him from the gym with a few other lads, going to our session on the Keppel unit. And he was walking with the lads and, kind of playing up really. And they were ribbing him really for being really slim, let's say. And he was really slim. And they were saying, like, you're really slim. Well, they were saying something else. And so this lad said, oh, what do you mean? I eat bear munch. And I was like, you eat what now? And so like I used to be able to like get the latest in the kind of terms that the young people use. So bear equals lots of, munch is food, so he eat lots of food. So I really liked that. I went on to go on doing PhD. So I was working at Leeds at the time. I was working at Leeds Prison at the time. And my supervisors, one of which is here today, Amanda. So I was doing a PhD, sorry, I wasn't. I'd just done my master's in forensic psychology, and I was working at Leeds, and my two supervisors from my undergraduate degree came to me in the prison and said, look, we've got a scholarship for you. We want you to do a PhD. We want you to do it on kind of what you're working on now, kind of looking at self-harm and suicide in prisons. Yeah, it's a scholarship at the University of Leeds. And I remember thinking I'd literally not long handed in my master's. I'd just graduated. It really wasn't something that was on my radar, and it really wasn't something that I thought I could do. But, I did it because it was too good an opportunity to miss. My supervisors were people that I really looked up to, and very different actually. So Dr. Amanda Harrison was a behavioural neuroscientist at the University of Leeds, and Dr. Paul Smith was a kind of very straight-talking forensic psychologist, let's say, interested in aggression. So I suppose the rest is history. But again, what I will say about doing a PhD, and if there's anybody in the room doing a PhD right now, I'm supervising one of them, Andy, and it's really, really difficult, especially when you're working full-time. So it took me 7 years to do my PhD, and it was the hardest thing I've ever done. I mean, friends will joke that actually realistically, how long did it take you when you actually sat down, when you stopped procrastinating? Was it about 6 months? But, it did take me 7 years. And it was really, really difficult because for most of you who know me as a friend, I am very social. I love my family. I love my husband. And, I want to spend as much time with people. I want to do the work, but I want to have a good social life. So have a good social life I did, and I did it. I suppose why? What did I do, and why did I choose kind of self-harm? You can see from the graph there, which is taken from the government website, that even since 2017, when I handed in my PhD, self-harm in general has tended to just continue to rise, and it is one of the real severe problems that we have in our prisons today, even still. It's not something we've tackled at all. And I always say, if I had a kind of magic pill that I could give, or something that I could do in prisons to make things better, it would be, and this sounds really simple, and it is really simple, so I'm not suggesting it is as simple as this, but I think what I saw in terms of people who self-harmed in particular, they had lots of really, really difficult emotions that they were managing, and they couldn't manage them. Often you'd be asking them, what happened just before you self-harmed? I don't know, it just happened. And it didn't just happen, there was a series of events that led up to it. As well as being kind of having deficits in terms of emotional management, there were problems in terms of impulsive kind of regulation, or regulation of kind of thoughts and actions, really. So that's something that I looked into, the kind of risk associated with impulsivity and aggression in terms of that effect on self-harm behaviour in young and adult males in prison. So I had two testing sites. I had HMP Leeds and I had HMP Wetherby. And it was, yeah, I did love it. I loved the pragmatic side of it, but probably not so much the kind of theory side of it. I think, again, if, Amanda will remember, I always kept trying to jump to the solution rather than thinking about what's the evidence behind it. And she was kind of pulling me back and asking me to kind of develop the evidence for it, really. I just thought I'd include a couple of pictures in here which really shows the sheer amount of support that I was given during this PhD, and also red wine really helped. But if you're struggling to sleep at night, then that green book at the top is my thesis in its kind of natural form before it was bound in a nice document. But you hand it in looking like that, and that spent me seven years to write. So as you can see, during the time, I had lots of support around me, and I couldn't have done it without, my mum and dad, my lovely husband who made sure I was fed and watered, and all the friends around me. So there's a postcard that I was sent from Claire at the back, who's got two gorgeous daughters, Ruby and Martha, and they said, "You can do it, Auntie Dee Dee." And my lovely friend Nikki at the back sent me a lovely bunch of flowers just when I'd submitted it. And she's been calling me a doctor long before I was a doctor, so maybe you were manifesting it. Maybe that's why I passed. It was a tough time, but I got through it. So moving on to, oh no, I just wanted to say one more thing actually. I'm going to show off a little bit more on that point. So the other thing I wanted to say was, I suppose other people might identify with this, especially women might identify that you might not think you can do things. And I certainly didn't think I could do it. In terms of handing in the viva, there was definitely an anticlimax to that. I remember going to the counter at the University of Leeds to hand it in, and the woman just barely even looked up and took it from me, and I was expecting some sort of like fanfare and at least a glass of champagne to be put in my hand. But that was really anticlimactic. And then there's the kind of revision, I suppose, in terms of you waiting for something called your viva, which is essentially an exam that an external examiner and an internal examiner will basically kind of question you on your thesis. So I was waiting for this moment. I'd had a practice with my supervisors, which in my opinion went really badly. I found it really, really difficult. I was really, really nervous, just like I was today. And I went into the room and they were really generous. And I think this is really good practice with PhDs. They told me straight away that I'd passed. So they said, look, you've passed. And now this conversation and this kind of viva is about understanding kind of where you're at. Is it going to be minor? So you get corrections, something called corrections. So is it going to be major revisions? Is it going to be minor revisions? And there's kind of various things within them. So I was thinking, right, okay, well, if I get major, it's fine. At least I know what I need to do. So I was completely expecting it. Did my viva. Came out. They obviously ask you to go out of the room while they kind of have a little chat. And they brought me back in and they said, okay, so we've decided that it's not major corrections. So I thought, oh, brilliant, wow, it's going to be minor. And they went, and it's not minor corrections. So the first thought was, shit, they've changed their mind. They've changed their mind, they're going to take it off me. And actually, it was no corrections. And I only say that because I was so underconfident going in that room and I did not believe in myself at all that I actually nearly talked myself out of it. So I just kept saying, you're joking, aren't you? You're joking. And he just kept saying, you need to leave the room now because no, we're not joking. And I found out today that only 9% of people get no corrections. So, and I think I'm joined in the room with somebody else who got no corrections as well. So yeah, we're in a good category. Learning and teaching, that's formed a huge part of my career at the university, and it's something that I hold very dear. A wise man, yes, I said a wise man, Carlton Cook, Professor Carlton Cook, said to me one day that if you ever get to be a professor, don't ever leave your teaching behind, always have your hand in to do some teaching. And I'm really pleased to say that now I am very prolific in teaching. I do a lot of teaching, and it's a part of my job that I really, really enjoy. And I think I'm really lucky as a professor to continue to do that, because a lot of professors maybe don't get the opportunity to do that. So I feel really lucky that I get the chance to continue to work with my wonderful students, who a lot of them are here today. So I've got Kelsey and Emma in the back, who are working on the master's programme and working at HMP Leeds, as well as prison officers. So a really, really tough job. So thanks for coming today. I remember the first lecture, I was given a big opportunity to do a guest lecture basically based on my work in prison by somebody called Paul Smith, who was my supervisor at the time. And he said, will you come in and talk about your work in prisons, particularly around self-harm and suicide, to our forensic psychology students? So I said, yeah, of course I will. So I came in, and I remember he left me in his room while he went to get us some drinks. And I was in his room, and I'd brought textbooks, I'd brought notes, I literally had like piles and piles of stuff. And I'd printed out my PowerPoint slides and everything. And I was in his room, he'd gone to get his drinks, and I was literally like revising essentially. And I was like writing things down and like just absolutely ridiculous, the hour before the lecture. And he came back in and he went, what are you doing? And I said, I'm just like reading my notes and stuff, like really nervous. And he was like, Danielle, he said, I've brought you in because you know what you're doing. You're working in prison, and I brought you in for that very reason. I want you to be yourself. I want you to talk exactly about what you do. I don't want you to try pretend to be me or anybody else. I want you to just be you. And that sounds like a really simple advice, but it was the best advice, genuinely. And I probably didn't take it for tonight because I've literally made notes here, notes under there. There's notes on that. I've made a script and everything. And I haven't stuck to it, but it's a little bit of a crutch. But yeah, so that was a really big bit of advice. Fairly quickly after that, there was a job going, a full-time job as a lecturer. So I was fairly quickly, I went into an interview and got the job. I taught on forensic psychology. I was really lucky as a lecturer. Often in psychology, there's so many different areas of psychology. There's cognitive psychology, there's biological psychology, there's neurological psychology. Often, as psychologists, we might get told that we have to teach an area that maybe isn't our specialism. But I've been really, really fortunate in my career that actually I've taught forensic psychology pretty much throughout. Fairly quickly, again, I was the programme lead for forensic psychology. And again, a little bit of boasting, because that's what this is about, isn't it? In the first 2 years, got 100% NSS. So NSS is the National Student Satisfaction Survey, and it's a big deal for universities. So in the first couple of years, we got 100%, and then we kind of thought, the only way is down from there, which it is. But you know, it kind of went no less than 95%. So we did really, really well. We had some amazing students, one of whom I want to personally mention. So Alicia Murgatoy-Giffen. So Alicia was literally, I think, my first cohort of students, and her mum sat next to her because you remember me from open days and graduation, and I think that really highlights actually how important our job is. And not just that, so this isn't just my first student. Alicia is now a senior lecturer at Leeds Trinity University, working in the forensic psychology department. And I say that to all of our students. I say that to all of our students. I say, when they're in rooms like this, I say, this is a job interview. You're here for 3 years and I'm interviewing you for the whole 3 years. And I want to know that you can work with vulnerable people with complex needs. I want to know that I can either work with you or I can actually work for you. That's what I want in the future for my students. I don't think they're going to go off into these random environments and I'm never going to see them again. I've got great relationships with my students. There's Hannah Thew/Wait, who's now married online. She's in Wales, but she did a doctorate in clinical psychology, and we've published some research together. I've brought students to conferences to kind of gain their confidence, really. The thing that really kind of attracted me to Leeds Trinity University, and still the thing that I'm really proud of, is that it's got a real emphasis on professional practice and application, and that's what I'm really interested in. One of the modules that I introduced in forensic psychology quite quickly on, because people like Alicia were working in practice as well as doing their degree, and I thought, hang on a minute, how come they shouldn't get credit for that, because they're doing kind of above and beyond. So I set up a module in the final year in level 6 so that they could get credit for that, to do that work, and it was kind of a bit more, you supervised on a one-to-one, and it was brilliant. More recently, and I'm not going to take any credit for this, but more recently, Dr. Samantha Wharton, Alicia, Anna, Russ, and others have kind of been really busy developing a master's in forensic psychology, and it's something that we've really wanted for a lot of years. So for those of you who don't know, to be a psychologist, you have to do an undergraduate degree that has the enough stuff in it to be able to go on to do a master's, basically. So our undergraduate degree in forensic psychology is accredited by the BPS. Then you need a master's, which is classed as your stage 1 of your kind of supervised practice, and then your stage 2 is going into a prison and doing the work, essentially, and being supervised by somebody like Helen. So we've now set up and had it validated an MSc in forensic psychology here, which is brilliant. And I was so lucky to kind of attend the first lecture that the team did, and it was just brilliant. The atmosphere is fantastic. The amount of students that they've got in the first year is just brilliant. So yeah, really, really proud. The picture that I've got up there is of graduation, and graduation is such an important time because it's a time where you can see your students in a bit of a different light, because you see them with their loved ones, their parents, you hear about what their plans are for the future, and you are able to kind of think about how you might be able to work together in the future. So that's a real kind of key point in the calendar in the academic year for us as academics or pracademics. Tempus Novo, as Alex said earlier, is a charity that I'm an ambassador for, and I'm really proud to be an ambassador for them. So Steve and Val, who are on that picture walking past our office, they set up the charity in 2014, and they were both senior officers at HMP Leeds, and again they kept seeing the same people come in and out of prison, and people were being released without a job, without housing, and we're expecting there to be a difference, that we're expecting them not to reoffend. You know, why are we going to expect a different outcome? So actually Stephen Val set up this charity, and what this charity does is it helps people who've been released from prison to gain full-time, secure employment. So it's not just an ad hoc thing, it's not just warehouse jobs where they're being paid below minimum wage, nothing like that. Really good companies like Clipper Logistics, John Lewis, Timpson's, places like that, work with companies, really good companies, to secure jobs for people who've been released from prison. And not just that, they don't just give them the job and then leave them to it. Actually, they mentor them for at least 6 months, often up to a year. And again, talking about the value of placements at Leeds Trinity, we've got Mel here, who's a caseworker. I can't see you, Mel. But Mel here, hi Mel. Mel's here, who's a caseworker at Tempus Novo, but was one of our forensic psychology students, is actually thinking about doing a PhD. You are doing a PhD. I haven't put you off. So you just see there the value of relationships. And now I'm talking about relationships, and I've got my colleague Andy Brearley in the room. I can't say anything without speaking about Andy, because again, I knew this, and I think I think that's one of my strengths. I'm good at building relationships, and that's why there's so many amazing people in this room, and so many people, students, people that I've worked with who have come back here. But Andy Brearley worked in youth justice and has published a good few books now, and talks about a model called PACT, the PACT model of connection. And that stands for presence, attunement, connection and trust. And for those of you in the room who have worked in the criminal justice sector, you'll understand that those 4 key things, key areas, are really, really important in terms of building relationships. But I don't think it's much different in terms of building relationships with students and anybody else for that matter. I've just included a couple of pictures in there. The one that I really want to highlight is not the one on the left, top left, but I'll highlight that for you, Alex. So I published some research. And then the picture on the top right is actually Richard in the black top is a person that was in and out of prison. I remember Richard at Leeds, in and out of prison multiple times, prolific offender, known to the police very much so, big problem for the police in the area. And he went to Tempus Novo one day and said, I can't do this anymore, I need your help. And they did help him. And there you can see his family, his daughter, his wife, so nice. And just hearing him speak about how he feels now, getting a wage at the end of the month that was earned, legitimately, is just unbelievable. I've also been lucky enough to do some research consultancy. So there's a project called, sorry, I'm just looking at time. There's a project called the None in 3 Project, which is a global research project looking to directly tackle the statistic that says that 1 in 3 women and girls will experience sexual or physical violence at some point in their life. So they were much further along in their research when I came along and the job advert came out. But through my good friend Dominic Wilmot, who was working there at the time, I applied for this job to work to basically engage with schools to ask if they would take part in this game. But it also involved them, the young people at their schools, to take part in a questionnaire. And the questionnaire did ask some pretty kind of risque questions, let's say, asking them about their experiences of sexual and physical violence, relationship and dating violence. So we thought it might be an easier job than we thought, but as soon as we started saying that to schools, they were like, no, you can't do that here. We actually don't want to know. And I remember us having a really difficult school and really difficult conversation. I won't name the school, but we were both furious because actually the head teacher was saying, no, we know what the stats are in our school. And we were saying, no, but you don't know. And they just didn't want to know. They wanted to bury their head in the sand and pretend it wasn't happening, and it is. The stat is 1 in 3 women and young people. That is a statistic that, again, as a society, we should be very ashamed of. So went round schools we did manage to engage with schools, and we went into London schools, Manchester schools, Leeds schools, and it was really good to see the children. And I was literally there, I was literally schlepping up and down the country, seeing the young people playing this game and actually hearing the conversations that they were having. So this computer game engages them in to have conversations about kind of dating violence and sexual violence and what should be kind of acceptable and I suppose what shouldn't be. And again, Alex, we've published some research, okay? Again, really lucky as part of my role as an academic that I get to go across the world really and talk in weird and wonderful places, and I've lectured in some wonderful universities across the country, including Loughborough quite recently, the University of Sheffield, Lincoln University, but actually I think the most weird place that I've ever done a talk is the place at the top there, the picture there. We stayed on base at RAF Lakenheath for 3 days, and myself, Dominic Wilmot, Dr. Dominic Wilmot, Dr. Agata Dubowska and Professor Dan Badushek were talking about things like mental health, self-harm and suicide and sexual violence, all of which have a high prevalence in army bases and camps like that. So, you know, quite interesting research. The bottom, again, I've got a picture, it's very small, but a picture of me and Andy and a young person called Atty, and we were very lucky to get to go to Jersey through some of Andy's connections to talk about the importance of connection, and we were training police officers, probation officers, youth justice workers, etc. And that was really, really interesting. And again, thanks to Alex, Dean of Research at Leeds Trinity, I was able to go to Porto for the International Corrections and Prisons Association conference and talk about my work there. So that was wonderful. Last but absolutely not least, in terms of kind of partnerships, and we've got Liam here from Unlocked Graduates, at Leeds Trinity in 2019, I just finished in my role as academic group lead for psychology, criminology and sociology, and I was kind of a bit of a loose end, and at the time Carlton was our head of school, I was approached, I'd done some work with Unlocked Graduates at the time, I'd done some guest lecturing, and I was approached to say there's a tender coming out to deliver our masters that goes alongside this graduate scheme called Unlocked Graduates. And I thought, well, yeah, obviously I'm going to do it. And this is where Claire comes in. So Claire, a kind of self-confessed workaholic, had taken some time out of working in the prison service. I think she'd taken voluntary severance. And she had a young family at the time and wanted to spend time with her family. So having not spoken to Claire for probably a couple of years, I rang Claire and said, Claire, do you fancy coming in with me on this project that I want to bid for? And you said yes, so that was good. But what I didn't realise, being the good Catholic that I am and always asking for forgiveness rather than permission, I actually didn't realise that you actually had to ask the university to bid for things like this, because I'd kind of worked with these people. I'd been actually approached to bid for the tender. It was a competitive tender, but I was approached to bid for it, so I thought it was a no-brainer. And we were initially told no, weren't we, Carlton? And that didn't go down particularly well because I don't really take no for an answer. So let's say through my tenacious nature, Carlton's persuasion, and also our Vice-Chancellor at the time, Professor Margaret House, I think I had a lot of support, and we managed to turn it into a yes. So quickly, myself and Claire were writing the bid. Carlton was really helpful in terms of helping us just look over it and make sure we were saying the right things. And out of 12 universities that bid for the contract, we were shortlisted down to 3, and essentially the rest is history. So in 2019, in December, we were given the contract. We weren't allowed to say anything until January 2020, where we were officially partners with Unlocked Graduates. So, as I said, Unlocked Graduates are a graduate scheme who aim to raise the profile of the prison officer and really think about what we mean by rehabilitation in prison. It also, as well alongside doing training with Unlocked, they also do, so our participants on the programme, we call them participants rather than students, they do a part-time masters, a 2-year part-time masters, whilst working full-time in prisons across the country. I think we're in about 25 prisons across the country now. So we've got some of my students here who are at HMP Leeds, we've got students at HMYOI Wetherby, and we've got students at HMP Wealdstone, which is in the kind of area, and then we've got participants across the country. It was a multi-million-pound contract. We got an initial 3-year contract with Unlocked Graduates to partner with them to deliver the Masters. We called it the Masters in Applied Custodial Leadership, and at the time we were told the reason why we won that bid, and it was me and Claire literally with Carlton really helping us along, but it was me and Claire delivering the contract, just 2 people, and there were 12 universities that bid for it with huge teams of people. But I think, and we were told by Unlocked, the reason why we got the contract is because of the applied nature that we propose that this programme should have. All of our assessments were very applied, very much related to their roles as prison officers and the kind of the teaching that they were doing and everything. And our experience as practitioners is so important. They don't want to be taught, students don't want to be taught on this programme, particularly by people who are theorists and just have read books about, or, you know, kind of read books about prisons but don't know anything about it. I think the fact that we were both practitioners really stood us, I suppose, in good stead. So for the first year, we had one cohort of students that joined us in 2020 when COVID hit, and we were the only graduate scheme of its kind, so in comparison to things like Teach First, Police Now, that actually managed, again with a lot of tenacity, to get this programme on campus. I remember there was a time myself and Claire were told by some of the works guys here that it would take, 21 weeks to get the university up to campus, even though it had just been empty. And we were like, what do you mean 21 weeks? Tell me what that 21 weeks looks like. And they were like, well, we've got to make the beds, we've got to, you know, paint the wall. And we were literally ready to put our gloves on and get in, weren't we? We were literally ready to start making beds because it was going to happen, and it did happen. So really proud that we were the only scheme to be able to offer this sort of training face-to-face. Again, it's just gone from strength to strength. And now we do have a bigger team who I've got here, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about them. But again, what we do is they come on campus for Summer Institute, where the majority of it is trained by Unlocked, and it's kind of the prison officer entry-level training. And then often what we do as masters teachers, we go off and teach them in places like Canary Wharf. We did have to do a lot of online teaching during COVID, and we're partnered with lots of wonderful people. And the person in the left-hand corner at the bottom is somebody called Pia Sinner, who was the prison group director for the women's estate. And we're partnered and have really good relationships with these kind of people. So I just wanted to talk, I think I've talked already, really about the power of the prison officer, and again how proud we are of those people, our students, you guys at the back, who work in such a difficult environment, trying to change the attitudes of the public, trying to change kind of thoughts and feelings whilst in prison, and really trying to help people to turn their lives round. Now, I'm not going to mention the word rehabilitate, because there's lots of critique of that word, and actually I really don't like it, because to rehabilitate means to bring somebody back to where they were at the start. And when we go back to the statistics that I said at the beginning, actually we can question that very much in a prison context. This is just an event that we did as part for our students. Again, what we've always tried to do on the programme is not just deliver a master's, but actually think about what else can we do with our students that helps them be more employable. So this is a panel that we had set up here at Leeds Trinity. We had about 60 people attending. And those people sat on the chairs are our participants who published research in the Prison Service Journal, which is a really prestigious practitioner-based journal. And they published their research, fantastic research. Scarlett on the right-hand side in the cream suit, she also won the Bennett Award for Outstanding Piece of Research in 2023, so really proud of her. Her research, again very applied, was about setting up spaces that were safe and kind of a space that was kind of, I don't know, like kind of somewhere where you could go to have a difficult conversation, somewhere where you could go if somebody was in distress. And she made 2 rooms, one for staff and one for prisoners, so that they could use those in the prison at the HMP Liverpool where she worked, and now she works in policy. Last but absolutely not least, I could not go without mentioning the wonderful team that I work with. So there's a couple of pictures on there. In the bottom, kind of, I suppose that's our team at the last graduation. So Emma Timon was a prison officer, senior prison officer who I worked with at Wetherby. Amazing, yeah, absolutely. And Emma is just incredible. She's doing an MBA at the moment. She literally keeps me in check. I don't know what I'd do without you, Emma. We've got, sorry Danny, I've used your picture without your consent. So Danny joined us about 6 months ago, so we haven't had a chance to have some photos together, have we, Danny? But Danny's fit into the team like a glove, literally. Danny's research is really, really interesting. Danny's just kind of in the final stages of her PhD. And Sarah, Dr. Sarah Way as well. So Sarah did some research with women in prison and thinking about the concept of trust and how we build and develop trust in prison. And again, the top left picture is myself and Sarah getting our Oscar or our National Teaching Award from the British Criminological Society. So yeah, there's lots of accolades that this small but mighty team have gotten over the past few years, and I'm so, so proud. And I honestly think in terms of the future is very, very big. I think there's lots of other things that we can do. I think we've proven ourselves in this space, in the Masters, and I think there's lots that we can go on to do. So I'm really, really proud, and thank you so much for everything that you do for me. I just wanted to end in terms of acknowledgements more generally. And I had a real thought about this. There's so many people in this room that actually, you know, I want to thank individually, and, you know, that would literally take all night. But I thought, actually, it really does go back to my grandparents, who I was so lucky to have for a long period of time in my life. So on the left-hand side is my Nana Tess and my granddad Jim, so my dad's mum and dad. They were both born in Ireland and met at the Ballroom of Romance, just outside of Hamilton. And they came to the UK, to Glasgow specifically, in 1954. And they had 6 of their children, my dad included. And then they went on to live in Leeds due to my granddad's job. And they had a further child, Carol. So they had 7 children. Carol's my godmum. So yeah, wonderful people. My granddad was just so mischievous, literally had a glint in his eye. He was just so funny. And I heard a story last night. So my granddad was, liked to drink, let's say, and poutine is an Irish potato vodka. And my nana was teetotal, so she didn't drink at all. And I heard a story last night that poutine often gets brought back from Ireland in different kinds of bottles, and a bit of poutine got put in a holy water bottle, apparently. So holy water came out, poutine went in, came over from Ireland, and my nana, very religious, very Catholic, had kind of a fountain where you could bless yourself as you came in the door. And apparently my granddad had filled it up with poutine, not holy water. And my nana kept blessing herself, being teetotal, and saying, God, that smells of alcohol. And he was just like laughing in the corner. So hilarious. On the right-hand side is my Nana Anne, who's here today, and my granddad Eugene. And they're obviously getting married. And they're getting married at the same place that me and my husband got married, so St Anne's Cathedral. So that was really special. So my granddad was born in Ireland, lived in Ireland and grew up in Ireland and was in the army for a short while. My nana was a tailoress here in Yorkshire, and they met at a dance hall as well. And my nana told me that my granddad chased around the dance hall till she danced with him. So, yeah, you know, we don't know the other version of that story, but I think it might be true. I think what's common in this is that both granddads absolutely idolised their wives. Like, honestly, you've never seen a love like it. And actually, I'm looking at my mother-in-law, Kay. I remember us going out for a meal with my nana and granddad when my granddad was alive. And Kay remarked, actually, I've never seen anybody so in love. Like, and I think it was true on both parts. Like, I think the men absolutely idolised their women, and that was so amazing to see, and so lucky to be able to see that. But what I do want to say in terms of acknowledgements is for my grandmas, my nanas, I call them. Both nanas were my nana is absolutely the matriarch of the family, and so was my nana Tess. They were the ones that were in charge. They were the ones that were, you know, making the rules, sorting things out, making things happen. And they were the, you know, really, really strong women. And so, you know, my nana is such a strong woman now. You do not mess with my nana. So acknowledgements really to having such a wonderful, wonderful family, which I think has helped shape who I am today, absolutely. I think it's made me have the fire in my belly that I have because of the wonderful people that I grew up with. And to, you know, my wider family, I just literally can't say, you know, enough about them and how amazing they are. And I won't go into too much detail there. And then just to my, you know, incredible, incredible friends who I've lived with, who I've cried with, who I've laughed with, who I have phone calls on a daily basis with, my ghostwriter, literally like such amazing people that I'm surrounded by, and colleagues from, you know, all areas of my life, old and new. I'm just so grateful that you're here today. I really, really, really appreciate it. So I just thought I'd end on this, which is... So that's me with the... Oh, I don't know what's happened there. That's me with the that's me with my arm around my sister's head. My poor sister. She did get me back. She did get me back and once walked me around the supermarket in a headlock, so she definitely did when she was older. She did get me back. But actually, I think what I would do is really think about what I'd like to tell people, and there's some lovely little young people at the front there that I am very proud of. And there are some amazing people in the audience. There's Scarlett in the audience, who's a student now studying psychology at A-level. So, you know, this might be something that you want to go into. But just in terms of advice that I'd like to give for somebody who might be in the same position as me, first of all, do not underestimate yourself. You are amazing and you can do whatever you set yourself to be able to do. And Gemma is the one that definitely is telling me that all the time. But do not underestimate yourself at all. Say yes to things. So a lot of people say no. I think say yes to everything. I pretty much do. And then something lands, you know, something goes right. Be yourself. Be yourself. There's only one of you. Again, you are amazing, and you know, don't replicate anybody else. Don't try be like somebody else. Think about what you're really good at and do more of that. Think about what you're not so good at and try work on that. But absolutely be authentic to yourself throughout your career. And the final one, going back to what my mum taught me, is absolutely treat people how you want to be treated. You know, you don't know who you're going to meet on the way up. You also don't know who you're going to meet on the way down. So absolutely treat people how you want to be treated. And that's everything from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that congratulations to Danielle. Danielle, do you want to join us in the light, though, please?
Oh, sorry, I forgot that. I've got fizz in my hand.
I think, is that working? Now, okay, we've got time for 5 minutes of questions and one very willing volunteer right there. So please do ask your question.
It's more of an acknowledgement than a question. I think one thing that you've definitely demonstrated is the ability to deal with complex characters, otherwise
Why would I be friends with you?
That's the first thing. But the second thing, I think we all know and believe that you know best at everything, and you are always the person that I would come to for the best advice, honest advice. And one thing that I think you probably don't know, I'm probably going to embarrass you, is just how unbelievably inspiring and special you are. Honestly, that was unbelievable. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to say well done. No questions.
That was an easy question. That was an amazing question. More of them, please. Have you got your hand up, Ria? Have you got your hand up, Ria?
Have you got a question for us?
Darling. Oh, that's the best question ever. That is literally, oh God, I'm going to cry. That is the best question ever. What I love about my job is helping people, I think. And that means whether it was helping people in prison, just make them understand that there is a different way of life and they can do different things and they can, I think they can have a different life, and just kind of to understand where they've come from and just to listen. I love that. I love helping people in prison because often they've never been told that they're good at anything. So I think that's really good. I love working with my students because they're amazing, because I work with some of them now. Like, they used to be my students and now I publish research with them and I work with them. So I think that's the best part, helping people, Ria. You like that?
I've got time for one more question. Is there any other questions in the room? Question over here, sorry.
Yeah, hi. A lot of the things that you mentioned, you were talking about kind of the practical aspect of, you've worked in the system, you understand it, and you've brought that into what you're doing now. Is that something kind of from an academic perspective you see that's gaining more importance?
Yeah.
practical side of things?
Definitely. I definitely think so. I think it's good to have a balance, certainly. And obviously, I do talk a lot about my practice, but I do know the theory behind it as well. But I absolutely think it's great to have a practical knowledge. So if we're thinking about education, isn't it great to be taught by teachers? You know, if we're talking about clinical psychology, isn't it great to be taught by people who have worked with people who have clinical problems and mental health issues? You know, I think that is really, really important, and I think particularly at Leeds Trinity, I think that's, you know, it's something that's really valued, and it's something that runs throughout all of our degrees. And I'm really not doing an advert for Leeds Trinity here, but genuinely that's kind of what attracted me to this university. And if I'm honest, I don't think I would be a professor at many other universities, because I'm specifically a professor. I do research, I do knowledge exchange, I do leadership, I do learning and teaching. I'm a bit of jack of all trades. Wouldn't say master of none, but I'm definitely a bit of a jack of all trades. But I think that's great. You know, I might say that and think that I'm kind of self-deprecating. I'm not. I think what I do is amazing. So yeah, I think.
Wow, what an evening that's been. Thank you, Danielle. That's been an absolutely great inaugural lecture. I'm not going to keep you much longer, because I'm looking in your eyes, and I can see that this is a room full of people that want to get to the snacks outside. So I just wanted to say that I wanted to disagree on one thing, because I think you gave an absolutely brilliant advert for Leeds Trinity.
Oh,
thank you very much for that. And I was really touched by your kind of reflections throughout, and debunking stereotypes of what it is to be a prisoner, stereotypes of what it is to be a prison officer or a professional in the prison service, and stereotypes of what it is to be a university professor.
Yeah.
Brilliant stuff. Well done. So one more time, and congratulations to Professor Danielle McDermott. Thank you again for joining us tonight, and if you make your way to the atrium outside, you'll have a chance to congratulate and chat to Danielle and have some refreshments. So thank you again.